This might have been the kind of question that I probably should have asked before starting this project. I have been fairly solidly running games for over 20 years. I run games at conventions, I run them at board game cafes, I've run teaching games as part of my job, and I currently run a few games on Start Playing. It would be very silly for me to not think that I am a good GM. Otherwise, why am I even bothering? Why am I doing all these dozens of things related to gaming? But I've been trying to think a lot lately about why I think I'm a good GM, or what would make me a good GM. Even in, say, D&D, which I openly dislike and often talk about how much I dislike, but I still have two home games who are eager to play even though they know that I complain about the system quite a lot. They still want to come back and continue playing with me, so I must be doing something right. Unless I'm underestimating the lack of GMs out there and this just coming to me because they genuinely have no other options. And I worry about this more and more as I get into arguments with the D&D community and how they think that games should be run, which I generally disagree with. These games should be about storytelling, the rules don't matter, and combat is not roleplay. It's just not, sorry. So if I disagree with the D&D nerds on these issues, what makes my game still good? And I think it comes down to a single concept, which is player agency. Players will rarely play in a game where they have more agency than mine. Player agency is basically the player's ability to change the world or change the story. It's their influence, how much their influence has on the world. It's the reason we play tabletop games instead of playing video games. Video games have a set path. Players can make options, they can deviate, they can choose how they do things, but a video game is always going to begin and end the same way no matter how many times you play it. Even if it has multiple endings, there's still a limited number of options there. In a tabletop game, there are no limit to those options whatsoever. The players can do literally anything and change the world however they like. The opposite is railroading, and why I've never really understood why you would run a module. It just doesn't make sense for the players to have a clearly set goal that they can either pass or fail. I treat running games like a writing exercise, by which I mean the players give me prompts and then I tell the next chapter of the story, up until a point where they need to do something again. If it helps for the explanation, I have this book here called The Writer's Block. You can see it's a little square chunk. The Writer's Block, that's, humour. In the Writer's Block, the idea is that you open a page and it will give you a prompt to write a story, or write a short, or just some kind of little something. Describe your first encounter with an illicit substance. Chain reaction. Spark words, so just chain reaction, write something around that. So it gives you a little prompt to do, write your story, or write the next chapter, or write whatever it is that you're working on, or even just write a little aside thing just to get your brain working. And this is how I run games. The player's actions giving me prompts to how I build the story, rather than me simply laying something out and waiting for them to find the solution. And as a result, I tend to create a very coherent story with elements set up by the players, even if they don't actually realise they've set them up. They might suggest something, or say something, or do something, or even just casually discuss some kind of element of the story, and I will then weave that into the narrative. And to the outside eye, this could in fact look like railroading. The players are always moving forwards on the story, but that's because I'm building the rails in front of them rather than simply pushing them down the track. I don't necessarily think that I'm very good at setting a scene, i.e. describing surroundings or creating atmosphere. I'm also not particularly good at accents or character voices. I think I can embody a character somewhat well, but I don't think I'm immersive in that way that, say, Matthew Mercer or Brennan Lee Mulligan is. But I think I'm much better at adapting the story to what the players want and what interests the players. I'm happy to have the players make a suggestion that sounds good and run with it, rather than wait for them to try and figure out the answer that I'm already aware of. So when, like many, I even subconsciously compare myself to the Matthew Mercers of the world, I just feel like I come up short, even though I also feel like I do a lot of things better than he does. I think I'm very good at weaving a narrative out of this jumbled mess that the players create and bringing it through to a logical conclusion. Problem is, if you don't get that arc or that conclusion, it kind of reflects badly on me, even though I would argue it's the player's fault for around too much. Player agency only works if the players do something. If they just wait for you to tell them what they're allowed to do, then that doesn't work for me. I can't run a game like that. When a player says to me, "What can we do?" I'm immediately lost. Why do I have to come up with options? There's an infinite number of possibilities that they can do. What would you like to do? What do you want to do? What do you think that you should be able to do in this situation? asking me what your options are, I haven't thought of the options. I can give some to you, but it makes no difference to whether I come up with these things or you do, because I'm going to improvise off of them anyway. What those players want is to be given a selection of options that they then have to puzzle out which the correct one is, but that's just not how the game works, in my opinion. And the question of whether or not I'm a good GM is very subjective. It will change from person to person. My style certainly won't work for some. So what I do is a very macro scale improv. Like, small scale improv is simply being in character, having conversations. That's what we all have to do in order to make the game work. But the macro scale improv, I don't think a lot of these professional DMs are doing that. I don't think Critical Role are doing it. I don't think Dimension 20 are generally doing it. I think they have their story arc laid out. They have their heroes and their villains and their plot points in place. They're just improvising the details. Whereas I am improvising the macro scale, I'm improvising the story, I'm improvising the plot points, I'm improvising the heroes and villains and monsters and things, and I might have a vague idea, but often I will change them. Often I will change a villain to a hero just because the players take a liking to them, or vice versa, change a hero to a villain because the players dislike them, or if they like them too much and I think it would be better to have them betray, I will just adapt to what I think will interest the players the most, rather than trying to draw the players into something that I find interesting. And that's how I enjoy running games. I enjoy writing, I enjoy building, and I enjoy building in the moment and seeing where it goes. And it's not easy. Sometimes I'm into an idea and I think the players are into it, so I keep pushing it, and then they just seem to keep pulling away, but they also never seem to let go of it. So I don't know whether they want it or not. I've reached a moment in like one of my games at the moment where I'm kind of not sure what if a little bit of push and pull, where I'm not sure if the players are wanting to continue or wanting to leave because they sort of say one thing and then do the other. Because the players are in constant improv, and the idea is that the GM isn't allowed to be, but that's the fun part. I want to be in that constant improv with them. I want to be building the world and having everything react and build off of them, and that creates a very fluid world with a lot of player agency. Like I say, a lot more player agency than maybe a lot of other games do. Everything the players do and say and think out loud will influence my world. It will influence the game. It will progress the story in some way. If the players have a theory and I like that theory, I will adapt it. If I don't like it, I will go against it, or maybe I'll create a twist out of it, or maybe I will build something off of it. So the players will be constantly creating this story with me. And I don't know if you can get any more player agency than that. I think that's all that is this constant back and forth. It's just that I have the larger tool set. I have the power. I can add things to the world that they can't do. They only have their own little sphere of character control, and depending on their game system, whatever else they have. But yeah, I have the power to change everything if I want to. If you had any thoughts on what I had to say here about the concept of how the game should be run, and how the importance of player agency and how to build on that, I don't know, I just had a little kind of thought that I had to get out there and just had a ramble at the camera. That's all I got. The end.